Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Post-Executive Council Media Briefing. I'm Davia Chambers and I'll take you through this afternoon's press conference. Addressing the media this week is the Deputy Chief Secretary and the Secretary of the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Assemblyman Dr. Faith B. Israel. So at this time, I'll hand over to Assemblyman Dr. Faith B. Israel to make her presentation.
Thank you, Davia. Feed on their own the way we would want to just breastfeed or bottle feed a baby. That will not work. If you even had the opportunity to look at the skin of a baby that is very premature, you would recognize that the skin does not even look like it is fully formed. It looks almost translucent. And again, that is because the skin has not been totally developed. Now, because of that, we have to place in babies who were born before their full-term period in what are known as neonatal intensive care units. That is what the NICU, NICU, neonatal intensive care units. There are usually 4 or so levels of NICUs. The first unit is for those that are maybe 35 weeks old, 35 weeks of gestation, and they really just need minimal support to get them to being okay. The level that is just after that is what is known as a level 2 type of NICU, and that is actually what we have in Tobago. We have a level 2B type of NICU. And the 11.2B allows the nursery to allow them to be able to do respiratory assistance, so we can help them breathe a little bit for a short time, really less than a day or 2, we can help them breathe quite a bit, and it would give us enough time to transfer the baby to Trinidad. Right now, we are looking at what it would take to lift our neonatal intensive care unit to move it from a level 2B to at least a level 3, but that will take some doing on our part, but it is something that we are currently looking at in terms of what we will do or what we need to do to get us to that point. So what happens if you have a baby in Tobago and the baby was born premature? So the baby is born, is at the hospital. The physicians or the medical staff at the hospital, recognizing the situation at the time once the baby is born, would reach out to the facilities that are available in Trinidad, either Mount Hope or Port of Spain, depending on the need of that baby. They would reach out and we would have an agreement. Hey, this is a baby coming from Trinidad, from Tobago. We need to send them to your facility in Trinidad. When that agreement is done, then the medical chief of staff at our hospital then makes the arrangement for transportation. It's one of those times where the helicopter comes as quickly as the helicopter can get here, because as you would recognize, we are treating with time, and time is critical because we need to get the baby to Trinidad as quickly as possible. We actually have 2 mobile transport incubators, so we place the babies in those incubators. We are able to do mobile ventilation, mobile intubation, and so forth to allow the baby to be able to breathe while it is being transported from Tobago to Trinidad. And then as the arrival happens in Trinidad, we then hand over the case to those facilities in Trinidad that have level 3 and above facilities. So that is a standard protocol that we use here. Now, as I said before, we are looking at what it will take to get us to at least a level 3 type of NICU on the island, but that is not something that I can promise will happen tomorrow. I try to be as realistic as possible when it comes to our promises as it relates to our systems here. But until then, we will have to continue using the mechanisms that are in place, using the protocols that are in place to continue providing providing the level of care that we can, the best level of care that we can in Tobago, and use the protocols to ensure that we do it as safely as possible when we move from Tobago to Trinidad. Now, at the beginning, how it may differ from what is happening in Trinidad because of the level of care that we are able to provide on the island. And with that, I guess we could open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Faith B. Israel, for your report and for providing us with that valuable insight. Members of the media, you're now allowed to ask questions. Of course, once you have a question to pose, you just indicate by raising your virtual hand. Do we have any questions from members of the media? Okay, if we do not.
So maybe I should So I was actually asked a question that has nothing to do with either of the points that I just raised by another member of the media, and maybe it is worth using the time now to answer it publicly. I understand that there may be concerns being raised publicly by members on the other side about the fact that we do have what is known as stockout happening at our health facilities, meaning you are prescribed a medication, and then when you go to the pharmacy, the medication is not available. I wanted to highlight the fact that what we currently do, the mechanism that we currently use to procure medications at the hospital and at our health centers and so forth, is really through a Ministry of Health contract with NICU that includes C40 having almost like a storehouse, and it is through NICU that C40 is able to procure all of these medications, bring them into the country where they need to come from elsewhere, and then that is where the different RHAs get their medication from. So it is unfortunate that in many instances, when the Tobago Regional Health Authority is reaching out to C40 to say, here, we need this kind of medication, if they do not have it, then we will not be able to get it. One of the things we have also been looking at critically, and I may actually get myself in a little bit of trouble for saying this, is that because we are having so many of this stockout kind of experience, that we are actually actively looking at what we can do to procure some of these medications outside of that C40 Ministry of Health mechanism, because again, it is really affecting our clients and our patients on the ground, and we do not want a situation where we are not able to provide the best service for them. So that is something that we are looking into as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that information, Dr. Faith B. Israel. I am seeing that we have a virtual hand raised. Whitfield Turner, I-95.5 FM. Good afternoon, Whitfield.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. Dr. Faith, you may need to briefly recap what you said earlier regarding the NICU situation here, because with the internet issues, a lot of it was lost, so we were unable to hear, and that's probably why we had no questions coming in earlier. Aside from that, if you can give us a status report as to where we are in terms of ambulances on the island. I've been hearing there's some sort of a shortage where ambulances are concerned, if we can address that. And also maybe in your capacity as DCS, the situation regarding internet coverage in Tobago given last night's blackout. If I can get a comment from you on that situation as well, thanks.
Certainly. I will start with the last question first. I was equally surprised, equally annoyed, equally concerned that we had a situation where the entire island had what seemed like a data blackout, a telecommunications blackout, and it is causing me to think about how unsafe a situation like that could be, and what we on the island need to do to ensure that something like that does not happen again. You know, one of the things I recognized some time ago totally by coincidence is that even though we have these telecommunication companies that provide different packages to us and so forth, it seems like they're all using the same lines, they're all using the same fiber optic mechanism. So when there's a problem with that mechanism, it means it doesn't matter which supplier or which one you use, you are going to get affected, and that is what is happening here. So what we have been doing is actually looking at mechanisms that would allow us to have some level of redundancy, to allow us to not necessarily be affected when something like that happens, possibly coming from Trinidad, and ensuring that our telecommunication mechanism here is in a better state, so that we don't have a repeat of yesterday evening. I was also sort of, surprised at how much of my life revolves around telecommunication. It seems like everything that I wanted to do yesterday evening required me to have data, and I didn't, which probably says something about the way we have evolved as a society. The second issue you raised referred to the ambulances. So we have had shortages with ambulance. The ambulance service has been a problem, honestly, from day one when I came into this position as Secretary for Health, Wellness and Social Protection. What does that mean? When I came in, we had a fleet of ambulances that were already past their expiration point. They were already old. They were already breaking down. They were already literally putting our patients at risk by even being in those ambulances, to be honest. What we have done thus far is gone out and procured a couple ambulances which are on their way to Trinidad and Tobago. As soon as they land and we are ready to put them into commission on the island, everybody, the whole of Trinidad and Tobago will know, because we will make a big thing about it. But at this point, they are not here yet, which is why we had to go through the process of leasing ambulances from one of the private companies that are available in Trinidad and Tobago to help to supplement our fleet at this point. It's also important to note that part of the issue with procuring ambulances is the fact that the companies that make them and sell them have been getting very large orders from other places. So they would get an order for a 50 ambulance and a 100 ambulance, and there is Tobago sending a procurement request to them for 2 or 3 or 4 ambulances. And you would recognize that would definitely not be at the top of their priority list. So that has actually caused quite a bit of delay as relates to the identifying and being able to purchase ambulances. But we have purchased a couple, they are on their way, and we are just waiting for the shipment process to come to an end before they get into commission. We have also, quite frankly, placed another order for other ambulances so that when those get here, hopefully it will not be too long before the second set comes in as well. The third thing that you spoke about was for me to basically go over what happens in Tobago as it relates to the NICU in Tobago. So as I said before, that a full-term infant or a full-term baby, meaning a baby that has spent up to 39 weeks in its mother's belly, is what we would classify as a full-term baby. Any baby that is born before that period is one that we would classify as preterm. The term that we usually hear is premature baby or preemie. And what I also explained was the fact that those babies who are born before that full-term period are actually are born without the capacity to survive on their own, depending on how early they were born. Some of the issues that they may experience include issues relating to their breathing because their respiratory system was not fully developed, or with their feeding because their gastrointestinal system was not fully developed, or even with their immune system generally, because that has not been fully developed. And because those preemies are in that state where they need medical support to survive, then we have what are known as neonatal intensive care units, NICUs, that can provide the type of support that is needed for those babies. There are about 4 or so levels of NICU. The first one really is the easiest level, which is that, the baby is just maybe 35 weeks or older, haven't gotten to the 39 weeks yet, and they just need a little bit of support, and we are able to provide that. What we have in Tobago, though, is the level 2 NICU, 2B, which allows us to treat with babies who were born 32 weeks. And we could get them to being fully functional and being fine if they were born at the 32-week mark. We are able to work with them. But if they are less than that, we have the level 2B NICU, which allows us to provide support to them immediately and then take them straight to Trinidad, where there are facilities that provide level 3 or higher types of support. These facilities in Trinidad, as I've been told, include the Port of Spain General Hospital, and Mount Hope as well is able to provide the kind of support that those babies need. So what do we do? Very quickly again, once we recognize that the baby is born and we do not have the capacity to treat with it in Tobago, we contact the facility in Trinidad, we get approval, we say, we agree this baby needs to come to Trinidad. When that agreement has been made, the medical chief of staff at the hospital then arranges for the helicopter to come. We are able to transport the baby in incubators that we place on the helicopters. We have the capacity to do ventilation, mobile ventilation, while they are in transit between Tobago and Trinidad. And then when they get to the hospital in Trinidad, they're able to move quickly into the NICU in Trinidad and get the level of treatment that they need to get at that point. And I also indicated that at the beginning of this, at the beginning of these reports, one of the things that I did was reach out to the TRHA to ensure that they were doing all of the infection control protocols, that they were doing everything that we needed to do, that our protocols were actually in place and actually being used, and we were following the rules that we had outlined for ourselves and so forth, and we got the assurance that that is happening. And let me add that I have also subsequently said, let us just make sure one more time that we are really doing everything that we can so that we can beef up the system if anything needs to be beefed up, so that we can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. B. Israel. And before we move on to more questions, let me just take this time to apologize for the connectivity issues we just experienced, which caused our live video to end, but we're back up and running now. So we have another question, this time from Nadaline Singh from Tobago Channel 5. Nadaline is asking, was there a Tobago baby among the 7 babies which died at the Port of Spain General Hospital?
There was a baby that originated in Tobago that has died in Trinidad. I prefer at this point, because I do not have the exact data, to indicate whether it was part of the 7 that were originally reported about, because I don't have that specific information. I think it's important to note, though, and I'm kind of glad you raised that, is even though what we are seeing now seems to be large volumes of babies dying, because of the situation with these babies, as I explained before, being not fully developed and so forth, we actually do normally have instances where preemies just don't make it, simply because they were really born way too early, 20-something weeks, and as much as we try to provide the support to them, they simply don't make it. So I am hoping that what comes out of the investigation that PAHO, I understand that I listened to the minister who indicated that PAHO is doing an investigation on what is happening in those specific places. I am hoping part of that investigation would include us getting from the report a clear sense of how many babies were actually in the system, in the NICU at that time, so that we can really compare and we can really determine whether the volume that we are talking about is actually an unusually high volume of deaths, or if it is the normal percentage of babies that die because they were preemies, but somehow the public is just now more aware of these deaths. So part of the report that I would be keenly looking for would really be to determine if the deaths that we are seeing now really is significantly higher than what has happened before, and the other information, of course, that will come out of that report, leading to what the causes may be if the volume of deaths is actually higher than normal.
Clayton Clark. Good afternoon, Clayton.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is to Dr. Faith Israel in your capacity as Deputy Chief Secretary. Mr. David Walker, former Executive Chairman of the Studley Park Enterprise Limited SPEL, is no longer the head of that state entity. We understand that he has taken the THA to court, challenging his dismissal. According to information received, he's yet to receive any documentation of his dismissal, or that the Executive Council, which appointed the approval appointment, has ruled on him being removed as the chairman, executive chairman. And he's also contending that Ashworth Jack, who took over from him, has not been received his documentation that of appointment, and also that while as executive chairman, he was provided with a vehicle, and the THO officials went to his home, broke his gate, and went in and took the vehicle before the time that they had given him to return the vehicle after his dismissal. So I'm seeking a comment on that whole situation. Thank you.
Certainly, and to be honest, my response would be that I would prefer not to comment on that situation at that point, at this point, simply because I personally do not have the kind of information to agree with or refute the points that you have just spoken about. If you are indicating that this is also a legal matter, then that is also a reason to not communicate further on that matter. So I will allow the judicial system to work through, and I am sure that at the end of this, a statement would be made about what has actually happened. But as I said before, I personally do not have enough information to make a statement that would be worth making about that situation at this point.
Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News. Good afternoon, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, Dr. Faith, and good afternoon, Davia. What happened, Dr. Faith, is that the internet, as Whitfield said, came off, so we weren't able to hear. But what I wanted to find out from you is, I know you would have stated before that the Tobago Hospital is not equipped to treat with premature babies. What I wanted to know from you is, how soon or what needs to be instituted at the Scarborough General Hospital to ensure that these babies can be properly cared for in Tobago and do not have to be transferred to Port of Spain?
Certainly. So let me correct the statement that you made. What I indicated is that babies that are born before the full term would require some level of NICU care. What I also stated is that there are different levels of NICU care, 1 to 4, 1 being those babies that are born 35 weeks and above, level 2 being those babies that are born 32 weeks and above, level 3 being those babies that are born 28 weeks and so forth. What we do have in Tobago is the capacity to do level 2B kind of care, which means we are able to do the basic, help them breathe, help them survive, because their bodies were developed well enough to be able to take them to that. And what we do is take them to Trinidad if we recognize that we do not have the capacity to do it. Now, so going back to your question, we have to think about this baby whose breathing system is not well developed, so therefore needs to be on a special kind of incubation, special kind of ventilation. This baby whose stomach has not been developed, or the entire gastrointestinal system has not been developed well, so we need to figure out how to feed them so that they can actually use the nutrients that we are giving them. This baby whose immune system is not well developed, so they need to be in a really rigidly controlled space where no infections and so forth can get to them. By no means am I indicating that I know the specific technology that we need to implement in Tobago to get us from a level 2 to level 3, but that is actually something that we have been looking at with the technical folks to get a sense of what we would need to go from level 2 to level 3. And I cannot give a timeline. As a matter of fact, anyone who listens to me or who has listened to me for the last 2 and a little bit years, you would hear that I do not give timelines because honestly, a lot of things just don't happen the way they are scheduled to happen. For example, even if you look at the ambulances, they were supposed to be here a long time ago, but we do not control the shipping mechanisms and so forth. So those are challenges that happen. So I can't give a timeline, but know that it is something that we are actually looking at right now to see what we can do and to see if it is even feasible and it is financially doable at this time compared to simply continuing what we do now and to take those babies to Trinidad. When you look at the volume of those preemies that we get, it may not be worth at this point when we do the assessment to spend the money to get us up to a level 3 or a level 4 when we do not have babies that fall within that category anyway. So again, it is that kind of assessment that we are doing to determine what is the next best step. And when we make that decision and when we do it, I tend to not make announcements before I am ready to say, hey, this was already done. So if it does happen, you would get a notice saying, hey, we have this level 3 NICU that we are now opening. Come and report on it, for example.
So we have a final question. This question comes from Nadaline Singh from Tobago Channel 5, and she's asking, the internet issue. The Chief Secretary had spoken about an independent system so that the island won't be affected when there's a breakdown of internet. What is the status of this?
Repeat the question.
On the internet issue, the Chief Secretary had spoken about an independent system so Tobago won't be affected when there's a breakdown of internet. What is the status of this?
I do not have a status report on that.
Thank you very much, Dr. B. Israel. We have one more question. Carisia Douglas, TTT. I'm seeing your virtual hand is raised, so this is our final question.
Pleasant afternoon. It's just a clarification, please, with regards to the question Annalene asked earlier about the baby deaths that were recorded. Just please, Dr.
So, Carisia, we aren't hearing you clearly.
That you have gathered was transferred.
Carisia, we aren't hearing you clearly on our end. Can you repeat the question, or can you restart the question, or you can type it? If you're hearing me, you can type the question and I'll pose the question to Dr. B. Israel because we aren't hearing you clearly.
I think what we are proving online in real time is the fact that we probably need some other private entity to step forward and provide the kind of internet telecommunication service that this island requires. So maybe this is a plug for me, I am saying to others, come, Tobago is open for business.
So Carisia, if you are hearing me, because I am not seeing your question in the Zoom chat, could you type your question and I'll ask it to Dr. B. Israel? Yes, so we heard that part, Carisia, you are seeking clarification. So we'll have to wrap up this press conference. Carisia, if you are hearing me, you can WhatsApp me the question and I'll have Dr. B. Israel respond to you this afternoon as soon as we get off of the live. So ladies and gentlemen, viewers, on that note, that's how we end this week's Post-Executive Council media briefing. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Faith B. Israel, Deputy Chief Secretary and the Secretary of the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection for your presentation. Thank you, members of the media, for your questions. I am Davia Chambers saying do enjoy the remainder of your afternoon.